Welcome to Office Hours by Triple X Church. I'm your host, Carl Thomas, and with me is our producer, my friend Neil. How you doing, Neil?
I'm doing good. How are you, Carl?
Man, I'm pretty good. It's Friday. So today is our first episode for this series, and I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a real benefit for a lot of people. For those of you who are first-time listeners or viewers, and in this case, that's all of you, Office Hours is an idea that I came up with, taking a page at what I've seen other companies doing to help their employees and customers by offering a way to answer unique user or case-specific questions about a certain topic. In this case, our topics are going to vary, I'm sure, but in general, we'll be dealing with questions about porn addiction, masturbation, sexuality, and the like. Neil is going to be helping me by asking those questions, and I'm going to do my best to answer them. But be aware, this is informal, and I'm going to be giving my best advice or opinions, but I always reserve the right to be wrong. That does happen, right? And so you all have the right to disagree. It's all good as long as we both understand that. No questions are off the table, as you will soon see, and I'm going to be honest and blunt with my answers, so please don't get your feathers ruffled, folks, if you don't like the answers, all right? Just buyer beware, right? Anyway, is that clear enough, Neil? Do you think I set the ground rules okay?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Cool. Well, then I say, without any further ado, let's get going. Neil, what do you have for me today? I think there's like 5 or 6 things we want to cover, right?
That's right. There are. Let's get started. I have found that audio and sex without the video enables me to get satisfaction. I do not imagine any real individuals in my mind. My wife will not have sex with me, period. I actually don't feel guilt or shame because I am not lusting on a real person. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I have several. They run the gamut. Let's start with this is like actually a multifaceted question. So first of all, first thing that stands out to me is, what is your definition of a porn, right? And I'm speaking to, of course, the person that submitted this question, because, and I've seen this happen with other people. It's like, well, if I do this, is that wrong or is this wrong? And at the end of the day, they're all doing the same thing. They're just looking for some sort of permission to indulge in something that maybe isn't quote unquote sinful or quote unquote wrong, right? Because it's not video or because it's not a picture or because I'm not envisioning the actual boobs, right? Then I guess it's okay. And I would tell you, no, of course not, right? Like porn, while in modern culture we refer to it as a genre, right, of film or entertainment or whatever, porn is like, on the larger scene or in a larger context, it's anything, in my opinion, it's anything that we use to elicit some sort of sexual gratification outside of our spouse, right? And to be honest, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but it even can sometimes be your spouse if you're kind of using them for sexual gratification and nothing else. We'll get into that later, but so that's the first thing that stands out to me. It's like, dude, your ideas about porn are they're kind of jacked, right? Like whether you're envisioning an actual body or not, you are fantasizing to a person by listening to their voice. And so, yeah, that's porn, right? Whether you want to admit it or not. The second thing that stands out to me is my wife won't have sex with me, period. That's a long conversation. I think you got a couple other questions you said that kind of relate to that. So we'll get into that later. I don't want to get too redundant, but that's just a problem there, and it's not just necessarily a problem with her or you, but it's a problem with both of you that you guys need to talk through, right? Like, I would say spend more time working on that situation and less time trying to find audio tracks that you can masturbate to. That'd be my suggestion. And then the third thing is, he says, I don't feel shame or guilt about it. Okay. Congratulations that you don't feel guilt about it. I think that's good. I never recommend guilt as a way of coping with anything. I don't think guilt is ever helpful. But, I'm sorry, Neil. Shame, right? I think it's good that you don't feel shame about it. But guilt can both be helpful and also toxic, I think. Maybe the better word here is conviction. Do you feel any conviction about it? It sounds like no. And I would say, if you don't feel any conviction about pleasuring yourself to someone else other than your spouse, I would say you need to talk to some accountability partners maybe, maybe go to your Bible, maybe pray a little more, but something's off there, right? Because it shouldn't, I don't know if it's you don't feel any conviction or if maybe you just kind of shut out the conviction that you should have heard, right? So that's my take on that situation.
All right, very good. I agree. Question number 2.
Well, that's good because it'd be awkward if you didn't, you know.
It would be awkward. No, I do agree. I think that something's off and needs to be addressed and requires some conversation with the wife, for sure.
Absolutely.
So, you ready for question number 2?
Yeah, man, hit it.
All right. I've had some accountability partners that tried to help me live porn-free, but not help me get what I want out of a porn-free life. What I want out of a porn-free life is a wife with big boobs. Yes, I said that.
Okay.
And other things related to character. I've prayed desperate prayers to God for me not to have a wife with small ones. I have been shamed, condemned, and shunned for wanting a girl with big boobs. I have been struggling with forgiving these people, and it makes me want to look at porn. I was wondering if you had any advice or insight.
Wow. So I don't want to shame you for your desire for big boobs. There are parts of this question I just can't help. I find them a little humorous, but I understand. Listen, so another question with like a whole bunch of different rabbit trails we could go down, and I don't want to spend an hour on one question, but let's start with the top one. He starts off with, in essence, the value of accountability for him, right? He doesn't say it necessarily in so many words, but the theme is I don't see the value in accountability because I'm not getting what I want out of it, right? I have accountability partners, but they're not helping me get what I want. And so let's start there, because here's the first thing, okay? You're approaching the whole topic of accountability wrong in the first place, okay? Accountability is not about, hey, what can I get out of it? Accountability, yes, accountability is good for helping you achieve goals. It's good for helping you accomplish things, whatever. But it's not about, hey, I need to find the right people in my life that are going to help me get what I want, right? You're inviting them into a conversation so you can stay accountable to them about the fact that you're staying on point with what you want. And you're allowing them the opportunity to speak into your life and say, dude, you're going off track here. You need to get back on track. But it's not their responsibility to keep you on track, and it's not their responsibility to deliver results, right? That's on you, my man. So the way you're approaching accountability, I'd say, is that needs to be retooled, okay? Second of all, quite frankly, maybe, and I don't know if his accountability partners are the people that are shaming him. If that's the case, they need a lesson on accountability. Maybe they should take our Accountability 101 course in the Live Free Community app. But regardless, maybe they're not shaming you, but maybe what you're hearing from your accountability partners isn't what you want to hear. And maybe they're actually doing the job, right? You're going to them saying, hey, you know what? I want to stay free of porn, and I want to do this, and I want to do that. And they're saying, okay, man, that's great. What are your goals? Well, my goal is to get a girl with big boobs. And they're saying, okay, can we aim a little higher, right? Like there's more to life than a large-chested woman. I know that's hard to hear if you're into big-boobed women, but there's more to life than that, right? That should not be your ultimate goal, the top of the pyramid. Hey, life is great if I find a girl with a big chest, all right? And I'll be honest, like, listen, when I was younger, especially in college and all, I was always, a big boob guy, right? I get it, right? So, but that should not be how you define whether or not you've achieved the pinnacle of your life, is I have a woman with big breasts. And so if they're telling you that, bro, they're doing their job. They're trying to get you back on track to say, hey, let's aim for something higher. Like maybe you don't want to look at porn and you're going to do these things to not look at porn because you want to fulfill a greater purpose, or because you want to make sure that the relationship you do end up in is that much better and has maximum intimacy and maximum trust. And like you guys sync, and you can't do that if one of you is hooked on porn all the time, right? Like that would be the goal, not, well, if she has big boobs, I'm good, right? Second thing or third thing is Yeah, you shouldn't feel shameful about what you like or don't like. Okay, I get that, right? There's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, I appreciate." We'll put it that way. I appreciate a large-chested woman. Okay, hey, look, there's plenty of women out there who appreciate a man with bulging biceps. It is what it is, right? I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. When I was in college, I liked Asian girls. I don't know if you knew that, Neil, but
I didn't.
that was. Yeah, so as they say in Philly, in fact, I'm wearing the shirt right now. As they say in the Philly area, that was my John, right? I didn't date white girls. I dated Asian girls. I was down with that. So, who did I end up marrying? I ended up marrying a white girl, right? And we sync, and I couldn't imagine myself with anybody else, right? But it doesn't mean that I should feel bad about back in my 20s, I happen to find Asian girls appealing. So yeah, I don't think you should feel bad about that. All right. But again, it all comes back to like, what's your big goal here? It needs to be more than I need to find a woman who's got a big chest, because if that's your ultimate goal, ultimately, basically you're looking for a woman that you can objectify, in my opinion. Hey, I need a woman that I can look at that looks a certain way. Who cares about the personality or whether she loves God or whether she is a good mom or whether she's a go-getter, or who cares about any of that? I just want to make sure she's got big boobs, and if she doesn't have big boobs, I'm out. That's objectification, and that's not cool either. So I would definitely say you need to reprioritize what you're looking for. Understand the nature of accountability better. And again, don't feel shameful about that's what you like, but don't make what you like all about the thing that you're trying to go after in life. Like that's just, quite frankly, a little bit insane, right? Because it's just going to let you down. What are you going to do in 20 years, man, when those boobs sag? Right? Like, for real, that's what a friend, come on.
Right.
So I think a friend said that to me one time, actually, when I was talking about, like back in the day when I was hooked on porn.
Smart
Hey, what are you
friend.
going to do in
Yeah, and I would say too about the prayers, desperate prayers to God to have a wife with a large chest. Maybe we should reevaluate what we're praying to God. What are our needs versus our wants? And because God's
Right.
going to supply you with your need. What are your wants, and how does that relate to your prayer? Just my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think actually that's something I didn't even hit on. I skipped right over the prayer part, but I think that's good. It's like, because so many of us get caught up with this idea of like, hey, I don't know, maybe it's just because we live in a prosperity gospel culture at times, but it's like, hey, God's my big sugar daddy, and he's like the big pinata in the sky that I just hit with a stick, and he rains down Cadillac Escalades on me with spinning rims. It's like,
Right.
man, God's not like he's not your sugar daddy, right? But he is your dad. And as a father, I know I don't always give my son the thing that he wants. I try to give him what I think he needs, right? So if you're praying, maybe God's answering, but you're not listening, right? Maybe you're like, hey man, show me the right woman, and she better have a big chest. And God's like, hey, look, here's the right woman. Newsflash, she doesn't have a big chest, but there's a reason for that. And you're like, well, that's okay then. Okay, well, yeah, who's to say? So I think that's a really great point, Neil, is like sometimes we should be praying for what's best for us, right? And trust that God knows that, and not just what we think is best for us. Because honestly, I'd say at least 75% of the time, what we think is best for us is probably not the best for us.
Exactly.
So that's a good point, Neil.
All right. Great question. If your wife doesn't have sex with you in over 8 months and sex is your love language and you don't want to cheat and your wife doesn't think sex is important after explaining to them it is important to you, what do you suggest?
Okay. Well, there's several things there. First of all, let's start with the most basic. There is no such thing as sex is your love language.
Exactly.
Okay. I think, was there 5 love languages?
5 language.
Touch is a love language. All right. To just boil that down to intercourse is like it's a very, very, very simplistic. No, touch. So hand holding.
Correct.
Arm caressing, shoulder rubbing. That doesn't even necessarily need to be sexual touch, right? Touch is a love language, not sex. So let's get that straight. Second of all, if you haven't had sex in 8 months, did he say that he had talked to her about it
Correct.
before?
Yeah. You don't want to tell your wife, but your wife doesn't think sex is important after explaining it to her.
Yeah. So, well, that's an issue, right? 8 months, no sex. I would say that's an issue. I'm not going to say that it's all the woman's issue, right? I know there's an evangelical thought over the years. I've heard some really atrocious teachings on like women and the requirement of them to be available, like they're some sort of, I'm not even going to go there, but, just a place for a guy to get off on. But there's still a problem there on both ends. And so if you're approaching her and she's not listening, I'd say probably want to get some counseling, because there's a couple things there. Maybe it's the way you're approaching her. Maybe it's the way she's hearing you. You guys are both emotionally connected. So a lot of times when you're emotionally connected and you're trying to explain something, it can be taken way more defensively than it was intended, and so forth and so on, right? There's a great book. I'm trying to think. I think it's The Way We...
How We Love.
Oh my gosh, I forgot what it's called. No, it was basically how to argue well. I read it in seminary, right? And it was a great book talking about how when you approach somebody, a lot of times we'll say, you do this and you do that. And so when you hear that, your first reaction isn't like, oh gosh. Your first reaction is, no, I don't. And then you're defensive, right? Versus if you go to somebody and say, hey, listen, when this happens, it makes me feel this way, right? So when you don't have sex with me, it makes me feel, not saying you're saying this, but it makes me feel like I'm not good enough, right? Big difference from just going there and say, you know what, you never think I'm good enough. Like, I'm on the defense. But when I hear that, when you do this, it makes me, well, gosh, I don't want you to not feel like you're not good enough. Let me explain, right? So, but honestly, a lot of us, we all suck at trying to, at conflict and conversations. It's tough. I mean, I try to do my best with my wife, and oftentimes I'll mess up and I have to backtrack, right? So if you've been going over this road for 8 months and you're seeing no progress, yeah, I'd say go speak to a counselor, right? And then this is a bigger topic, but there's also the whole issue of, well, what is sex, right? Like for men, a lot of us, unfortunately, and it's not, I don't think it's a genetic thing per se. I think it's just the way what our culture's taught us both inside and outside the church at times. We think of sex as orgasm, right? Intercourse and orgasm, whatever, that's sex. And women, sex is a much bigger thing. It's not just intercourse and orgasm. And they do want an orgasm, by the way, guys, okay? So get that out of your head. Like, well, as long as I'm good, they're good. No, they want satisfaction too. Sheila Grigori, I think is how you say her last name. She wrote a book called The Great Sex Rescue. Great book. It's meant for women, but she said in a podcast I was listening to with her that a lot of the people that buy the book are actually men trying to find out how their woman thinks or how their wives think about sex. So I'd say maybe to both of you check that book out as well. But I would definitely say counseling is in order if you want to get past this, because 8 months, that's a long time to make no headway. And again, a lot of it could just be a difference on perception or how you both are approaching the problem. A lot of defense there, a lot of walls being thrown up. And quite frankly, did he say that he's actually looking at porn, or is it more like, hey, if this is happening, what else am I supposed to do?
Just what to do with this when this is happening.
Yeah, so
he doesn't mention porn.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say I'm thinking maybe you're looking at porn and like it's like, hey, I don't want to. The reason I say it is because he said, hey, I don't want to cheat, and a lot of guys, including myself in the past, think, well, porn's not cheating. That's also not accurate. But regardless, I know that mindset because that was my mindset at one point. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say you might be looking at porn thinking like, hey, what's my other option, right? And I'll tell you right now, that doesn't help the situation either, right? If your wife knows you're looking at porn, that's not going to be like, oh gosh, I can't wait to have sex with that man. Like, my goodness, dude, you're doing everything wrong if you think you're going to entice her by saying, hey, well, if you're not going to do it, they will, right? This person on the computer screen will. Like, you want to drive your wife away from the bedroom, do that, and that'll definitely do the trick. So, hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes down to the same thing. The other question that was asked is just having that conversation and figuring out where that problem lies, but definitely learning to communicate with the wife, with the spouse, and figuring out what the issue really is. So, it doesn't have to be an issue.
Yeah.
All right.
And I know you've been taking some collegiate or master's level counseling courses, so you know all this. But it's like sometimes that's why you have a counselor. You need like kind of like a mediator almost.
Exactly.
Don't approach him as a mediator, because a good counselor is not going to take sides per se. But sometimes you need that impartial person that's not emotionally attached to the situation to be like, listen, you're not looking at this the best way, or hey, why does this bother you? And then when it's presented in a different way versus like, you never have sex with me, it might be received a little better. And again, maybe part of the reason she doesn't value sex is because the way she views sex and treats sex is not the way you view and treat it, right? She wants like more of an experience, the way it was designed, more intimacy, more everything else, and you're just in it for a quick orgasm. Like, back to that author, like she calls it one-sided sex. Like, yeah, I don't blame a person that doesn't want one-sided sex either, right? Like, yeah, why would I sign up for that? Like, you get you, and I just got to be content with being there. Like,
No.
Come on, man, who's going to sign up for that?
Exactly.
No.
Exactly. I think you're right too. And coming from a counseling background, man, I'm going to go ahead and just say it. I recommend everybody see a counselor at some point, not because they have problems necessarily, but because so many times we're caught in our own issues. It's kind of like we can't see the forest for the trees. So having somebody else where you can lay your crap out and they can kind of help sift through it with you, and not take sides, but get to the point, I think that's definitely relevant.
Absolutely. What we got next?
All right, coming up next. This is a tough one. I was molested as a child and introduced to pornography by one of my molesters. I would like to know if masturbation and pornography are wrong. As a Christian, I'm abstinent, but still have natural urges. Do I just suppress them until the appointed time, or is it okay to masturbate once in a blue moon to relieve some sexual tension? The reality is that I was sexually activated without my consent, and I don't know if or how to behave as someone who hasn't been by just ignoring those urges. I do not wish to sin against God, but I want to know what now. Do I need to just more therapy and exercise discipline until I'm married? I look forward to hearing from you.
Wow. Yeah, that one's heavy. So, like, first of all, I would say, even though they're definitely connected, they're not in some regards in terms of like the two different things. Like, hey, you got molested. That's super unfortunate. Very much empathize with you. And, that's horrible, right? No one needs to go through that. Way too many people do. And yes, it's going to have a significant impact on how you mentally process things, emotionally process things, and yes, sexually process things, right? It's definitely going to have a huge impact there. Granted, right? That being said, that doesn't mean like, well, then porn and masturbation should be okay because I got served this bad hand. One with Steve Luff, a therapist friend of mine who's great. He's the guy he's got a new book coming out, and he was basically the brains behind the X3 Pure course that we offer. I think in a podcast or interview I did with him, he said, guys, there is no good, I forgot how he said it. It was pretty blunt, but something to the effect of, guys, there's never a good reason to go in your pants and play with your penis or something like that. It was so funny. But like, he was just like, there is no good reason. And honestly, like, I've read other authors who are not Christians, like Mark Manson. I like him. He's a good author. He's got some crazy books out there. But I think he's a pretty interesting thinker. And like a lot of these same authors, they all say the same thing. It's like, hey, look, stuff happens to you, but how you react to that stuff is entirely on you, right? Like you can't blame your choices on what happened, right? It's unfortunate this happened. We all get dealt a bad hand at times, but how we play that hand out is on us, right? So all that to be said, like I said, molestation, not making light of that at all, that is terrible. And it's absolutely going to have a profound impact on you. But no, it does not give anyone a pass for porn and masturbation and that. Second, I understand you don't want to sin against God and the whole God thing, and I'm a Christian and a pastor, so I'm not degrading that at all or discounting that at all. But a lot of times when people come from a Christian or religious, especially background, even more so, there's a lot of shame thrown on this sexuality topic, and so it makes it even harder to deal with. And speaking as the guy who was a Christian, who looked at a whole lot of porn back in the day, I can tell you that Christian guilt was never a super powerful influencer for me to make the right decisions, right? It was out there. I was like, oh gosh, God's not going to be happy with me. But ultimately, it didn't change my choices. So when topics, especially masturbation, come up, like, but even porn like this, and it's like, well, is it wrong or is it not wrong? It's like, listen, yes, it's wrong depending on your worldview, right? If you have a non-Christian or if you have a worldview regardless that doesn't view sex as like something that's meant for marriage, then maybe you're not going to see it as morally wrong regardless. But rather than approaching it that way, I would rather just approach it as like, is it healthy or unhealthy, right? And if you were exposed to this as a child, which created an unhealthy desire for more of it, feeding that desire is just going to make it even more unhealthy, right? So it's like, what's your goal here? Is your goal here to stay baseline, right? Or is your goal to improve situations? Is your goal to get healthier, to get better, to heal? You know, what's your goal? And if your goal is to heal and to get better in this area of your life, then the last thing you want to do is indulge, right? So that's how I would view that. And as far as like, well, should I just, hold off till I'm married and blah, 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 blah. Like, I would say the reality is all of us, whether molested or not, all of us have been exposed to probably, I would say, not probably, have been exposed to higher levels of sexuality than we were really meant to be exposed to. So we're all our brains are all kind of jacked up a bit in some regards when it comes to that. But, do I just hold off till I'm married? Whether you had sex before or whether you're still a virgin, I would say, yeah, you want to hold off till you're married. But again, I like to approach this topic a little more broadly than just, well, don't have sex before you're married because God said so. Because that is just, again, might be accurate, but it's not a very powerful motivator. I would say there's a lot of other reasons that you might not want to have sex before you're married, many of which boil down to how your brain bonds with things that you orgasm to, right? So if you want to have a super close relationship with your wife going into marriage and you want to be satisfied by her and her alone, it doesn't help if you bring a whole bunch of sexual baggage into the marriage with you to start with, right? So
true.
That's a deep topic. And yes, I would also say, yeah, more counseling. Not because you're especially screwed up or especially, but like you said, Neil, like I think counseling is healthy for anyone. I still see a counselor. I went to start seeing my counselor years ago because of anxiety, like straight up panic attacks. I haven't had one of those in years, but my wife and I both are like, no, Carl, you still should go for just a tune-up.
A tune-up.
Right? So I go like once a month. And sometimes my counselor jokes with me and says, do you really need to even come anymore? And I'm like, yeah, I think it's a good idea. So even if it's just to decompress and try to look at things that maybe I don't even realize are becoming a problem right now. So yeah, more counseling. Especially if you have a lot of trauma in your background. It's never going to hurt to have more good counseling.
Exactly. And I want to speak to this one too, coming from somebody that was molested at the age of 16 myself, you know, that counseling is so important. It's so important to find that healing. Because like was mentioned in the question, you know, about, you know, being sexually activated without their consent, there's going to come a point in your life where you're sexually activated again with your consent. And there needs to be a form of healing between those two things. Otherwise, it's gonna damage your relationship. I'm 41 years old. I hate to say it, but it's fine. The point is, at 41, I'm still dealing with things from my past. I'm still dealing with those things, and they still come up. So I have to manage that. So definitely recommend the counseling and getting in with an accountability partner for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Good stuff.
Good question. I watch porn shows and involve in masturbation occasionally whenever my wife denies me for a length of time. I'm not happy to do it, but I am denied by my wife, and I don't want to involve in having a girlfriend or having sex outside of marriage. Then am I constrained to do it? What can I do in this situation?
Well, we're not going to spend too much time on this one because I think we've kind of already answered this. But again, first, major myth buster here. Looking at porn does not mean you're being faithful to your wife. You know, it's like, oh, hey, I'm not getting in with a neighbor, you know, but I'm looking at porn, so that's somehow better. Like, I guess from a really like, oh yeah, okay, your wife probably would rather you look at porn than be sleeping with a neighbor, I guess. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You're not being faithful, right? So let's just forget all that, right? Oh, my wife's not having sex with me, so that should give me permission to go look at porn and masturbation as long as I'm not having an affair. Dude, you're still being unfaithful, and it's still going to hurt, and it still could end up in a divorce at some point, to be honest. And then second thing is, again, going back to 2 or 3 questions ago, how long have you been working on this? Have you been talking to her? How have those conversations went? If you guys have had multiple conversations over this and it's not going anywhere and it always ends up in a blow-up conversation, yeah, look at counseling, look at getting a mediator involved, maybe do some reading together. Again, The Great Sex Rescue, I think, is a good book. But yeah, just kind of start delving into this stuff, and that is really uncomfortable, really difficult, but it's going to pay off in the end. And again, also, yeah, if she knows that you're going to sex and porn once in a while, you're not helping your case there, buddy. Like, you're just going to make it even less desirable for her to have sex with you. So I think that's enough said on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question. Is masturbation wrong?
All right.
And if it is, what am I supposed to do when I have no sex with my wife or husband?
Gosh, I feel like this is a theme.
It is.
Again, we've talked about all this primarily. But with the masturbation question, I think this is the biggest one that I run into. And a couple months ago, this was like the topic for the whole month in the Live Free Community app. You guys can check it out. We have a bunch of free courses and videos and teachings in there. But we talked about masturbation the whole month. And yeah, I approach the whole masturbation topic similarly as I was saying earlier. It's like right, wrong, whatever. I like to approach it more as healthy versus unhealthy because, again, speaking as a Christian man who had done all these things, the whole don't do it because God said so angle never was a huge motivator. I'm sorry. Not saying that's right. I'm just being honest. So, but when people approach things from hey, is this actually good for me? Is this actually going to give me what I want? Is this actually going to enhance my life? Then sometimes we start to pause and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I should pause here. Not because I'm afraid I'm going to get hit with some lightning bolt by God, which, by the way, he doesn't do stuff like that. But because, like, if I do this, it's really not going to help my situation. And what do I want more here? Do I want an orgasm because I have quote unquote sexual needs? That's a whole nother path we could go down. Or do I want to set myself up for, a healthier life, a healthier marriage? Or, and did this guy say he was married?
Yeah. So, what do I do when I have no sex with my wife or husband? So, yeah, I assume they're married.
Yeah. Do you want to, again, back to the conversation thing and talking it out and having these dialogues, but do I want a healthier marriage or do I want an orgasm?
Right.
You know, and in this case, we're talking to a married man, but I'm assuming he's married. But I mean, I'll just share briefly and then we'll wrap it up. But I talked to my son some time ago about masturbation. And I know it was a tricky question. And my kid's, he's young, he's 13. I probably should have had that talk actually a little sooner. I had the porn talk with him when he was real young. And I don't know what I was thinking. Anyway, so I should have had the masturbation talk sooner. But luckily, I talked to him before he masturbated. And I don't think he has since. But when we had that talk, I said to him, like, at 13, it's not about a, hey, I'm going to sin against God thing. It's about like, hey, there's this thing between my legs, and when I touch it, it feels kind of good, right? It's just, honestly, it's curiosity for the most part. And so I had to explain to him. I'm like, Hunter, listen, this is what masturbation is. And of course, he laughed. And I was like, no, but I'm not going to lie, buddy. It feels pretty dang good, okay? You know, and so some of the parents' minds are probably blowing up right now going like, I can't believe you told him that. The first thing he probably did was run and masturbate. And I said, but dude, you got to understand there's consequences that come with this thing. And I explained to him like how our brains work and how they bond. And I'm like, like when you come home and you have a bad day at school, right? Because you didn't get along with this kid or that kid. What's one of the first things you do? He's like, well, usually I'll go shoot hoops. Okay. To blow off steam, right? Yeah. Why? I like it. Okay. You know why that happens? Like your brain knows it likes the way you feel when you shoot hoops. So you come home, you feel bad about your day. Your brain says, hey man, I know what's going to make you feel better. Let's go shoot some hoops. You go shoot hoops, you help your cardiovascular health, you're getting healthier, you're putting up a better shot. All good things, right? Now, introduce your brain orgasm at your age. Oh my gosh, right? That's like, now your brain's like, this is ridiculous, right? And like, now what's going to happen over time is your brain's going to be like, forget about shooting hoops, let's go masturbate. And you're going to spend all your time up in your bedroom masturbating. Like, that's not healthy, right? He's like, no, Dad, that's not healthy at all. I'm like, no. I'm like, so just understand, like, you're opening up Pandora's box here. So same thing here. It's like, man, like, right or wrong, good or bad, it's not healthy. It's definitely not healthy for your marriage. And especially if you're in a marriage where the sexual relationship is stressed, the last thing you want to do is bring more baggage into that situation by introducing porn or masturbation or any of these things, and then even going one step further to justify it.
Exactly.
Like, there's nothing worse than that. Hey, babe, do you look at porn? Yeah, but it's okay because you won't have sex with me. See how that goes.
Wow.
Like, that's not going to go very well. So,
and don't even bring erectile dysfunction
right?
into it.
Yeah, I don't even get into that because there's still some of the science out there is a little sketchy with it, but
still,
yeah, if it's not healthy, that's what matters,
Right. Agree.
So, all right, man, cool. That's it for today, right?
That's it.
All right. Well, listen, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode and got some information out of these questions. Granted, some of them might have been a little out there for you, but one overall or one overriding theme here is it wrong? Is porn wrong? Is masturbation wrong? Is this stuff wrong? If I have these other extenuating circumstances, and ultimately the answer is wrong or right, good or bad, it's not healthy. There's never a good reason to do these things that are going to actually end up damaging you and your relationship with your spouse. And if you have a stressful situation with your spouse already, the best thing you can do is work on that and worry less about how you're going to get your rocks off the next time. So, thanks, Neil. Appreciate it, man. We'll be back next week.
See you then.
All right. See you guys.